Ethan Stone was used to the hush of the office after midnight, when the last of his coworkers had long since gone home, and the flickering fluorescent lights made shadows dance across empty cubicles. He was a 32-year-old software engineer, tall and lanky, with pale skin that seemed to absorb more screen glow than sunlight. He preferred the predictable hum of the servers to the complicated hum of human conversation, for social interactions wore him down, and he often found himself stumbling over words or forgetting to laugh at the right moments. So, every day, he lingered in the office until the cleaning staff hinted, politely, that it was time for him to leave. He would gather his laptop, tuck it carefully under one arm, and step out into the neon-lit streets of New York City, comforted by the emptiness that awaited him outside. That night, as Ethan took his usual route, cutting through a portion of Central Park that remained only half-lit by antique-style lamps, he saw something he had never encountered before. A mysterious streak of electric blue light tore across the sky, like a miniature comet, and slammed somewhere beyond the line of twisted tree trunks. The ground seemed to quiver beneath his feet. His heart raced, but he felt a sudden jolt of curiosity. It was no thunderstorm, no stray firework, no meteor. It looked distinctly unnatural, as though guided by an intelligence or propelled by machinery. His breath caught in his throat as he stepped from the well-worn path and tramped through overgrown grass, heading toward the source of that strange illumination. When he reached a clearing, he saw a small crater, no more than 10 feet wide, smoldering with an ethereal glow. At the center lay an otherworldly figure, slumped and trembling, with what looked like a wound in her side. He could scarcely believe his eyes. She was impossibly beautiful in an alien, celestial way, her skin faintly shimmering beneath the moonlight. Her hair, dark and flecked with star-like specks, rippled around her face, framing features that were both haunting and regal. He gulped, fumbling to speak, but no words emerged. Then she looked up, her large eyes filled with a mixture of pain and relief, and whispered in a trembling voice, "Help me, human." Ethan's instincts told him to run. Yet something about her appearance, the vulnerability in her eyes, the subtle glow that encircled her form, compelled him to stay. He crouched by her side, mind spinning. I don't know how," he managed to say, voice quavering. "Are you hurt?" It was a ridiculous question, for the evidence of her injuries was plain, but it was all he could think to ask. She gave a weak nod, pressing a slender, alien hand to the wound in her side. Her fingertips glowed faintly with every quiver of pain. "My ship," she rasped, "crashed. I can't walk. You must help me find shelter, or we both will be discovered." The final word was spoken with a frightened tremor, as if discovery was an even greater terror than her wound. Something in that moment spurred Ethan to action. Perhaps it was the thrill of witnessing something beyond human understanding, or maybe it was the buried altruism in his heart. Either way, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, lifting her gently. She was surprisingly light, though tall, and her skin felt warm and unnaturally smooth, like polished stone. He steered them both out of the crater, trying his best to avoid the swirling swirl of smoke. As they stumbled through the dark park, the alien woman leaned against him, whispering in broken English, "My name, Lyra, Princess of Zeylora." "Zeylora," Ethan repeated, too stunned to form a coherent response. He tried to piece together what had just happened. A ship had crashed, and this being, this princess, had reached out to him, a random, socially awkward software engineer who stayed too late at work to avoid small talk. Yet he also felt a flicker of excitement mingling with the deep worry churning in his stomach, because if she spoke truly, if she was from another planet, that meant they were no longer alone in the universe. Before he could ask more, the shrubs ahead rustled. Several sets of heavy boots stomped through the park, accompanied by barking voices. Spread out, he heard a man shout, "The energy reading shows it should be close." The sense of danger that flared in Lyra's eyes was unmistakable. Ethan stiffened. Government agents, or perhaps some clandestine paramilitary group, were combing the area for whatever had fallen from the sky. Without pausing to consider, he ushered Lyra behind a clump of thick hedges, pressing a trembling finger to his lips in a universal sign to stay silent. She nodded, her breath uneven, eyes shimmering with pain and fear. The flashlights cut through the darkness, sweeping back and forth, voices turning urgent. One of them was sure they were on the right track. But just as the bright beams drew near, Lyra summoned a small device from the folds of her tattered clothing. Ethan noticed it glowed with a shifting array of symbols and pulses, reminding him of an advanced alien tablet. She pressed her fingertip against its shimmering surface, and in a burst of cerulean light, the park vanished. Ethan felt his stomach lurch as though gravity had abandoned him. For a moment, the world dissolved into a swirl of luminous shapes and intangible humming. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sensation ended, and they stood within the battered confines of an alien spacecraft. The walls were curved and silver, flickering with faint lines of alien script. Sparks flew from damaged conduits, and a low klaxon moaned from somewhere deep within the hall. A wave of panic flooded Ethan. He was on an extraterrestrial ship, teleported away from Earth, and the fear that struck him was only tempered by the awe of seeing technology far beyond anything he had ever encountered. Lyra, gasping with effort, stumbled down a short corridor, gesturing for him to follow. "We must leave your planet immediately," she said, words hurried, laced with quiet regret. "They will destroy me, or experiment on me, and they will do the same to you if they discover my presence. Please, I beg your understanding." Ethan's rational mind screamed that he should protest. He should fight to stay on Earth, or demand more answers. Yet he saw the desperation in her eyes, a kind of urgency that transcended species. Resigned, at least for the moment, he set his jaw and nodded, allowing her to guide him through the winding passages. Lyra reached a control panel, its symbols flickering, her breath ragged, and pressed a series of glowing icons. At once, the ship shook violently. An engine roar thrummed through the metallic floor, and Ethan felt his equilibrium give way. Through a nearby viewport, the city lights of New York grew distant, receding into the ink-dark sky, and within seconds, Earth had shrunk into a glittering sphere. Stars replaced the horizon, an endless tapestry of darkness lit by cosmic fire. He stood motionless, one hand bracing against the wall, unsure whether to tremble or exult. He had left his home planet, whisked away by a wounded alien princess, with government agents mere yards away. It was insane. It was impossible. Yet it was happening. Lyra slumped forward, eyes fluttering, and Ethan rushed to her side, gently lowering her to the floor. Her face was contorted in pain. "We have only a short time before we jump," she murmured. "The ship is damaged. I must speak to you about the reason I came here. But first, help me stop the bleeding." Ethan looked around in a daze, rummaging for anything resembling medical supplies. He found a silver case attached to the wall, opened it, and discovered a series of alien tools, needle-like instruments, vials filled with glowing liquid, bandages that seemed to cling to the skin. Following Lyra's shaky instructions, he administered the correct serum to the wound, fastening the bandages over it, and watched as her bleeding slowed. The faint radiance of her body pulsed softly, like a star on the verge of burning out. Once the crisis had passed, Ethan slumped beside her, exhaustion tugging at his every nerve. He stared out into the void, mind reeling with questions. "Princess Lyra," he finally said, his voice hushed. "Why did you come to Earth? Why teleport me aboard your ship? I'm no one special." She let out a sigh, her breath rattling a bit. "On Zeylora," she began, "my people are suffering under an ancient genetic curse, placed upon our royal family by an entity older than recorded time. This curse afflicts our entire civilization, as our monarchy is intertwined with every dimension of Zeyloran life. It stifles our growth, drains our vitality. Only a specific genetic key can unlock the way to break it, and our prophecies, combined with centuries of research, led us to Earth. We discovered that your DNA, your singular genetic signature, is the missing piece we need, the only hope to lift the darkness that has plagued us for millennia." Ethan's voice caught in his throat. You're telling me I'm the key to saving an entire planet?" It sounded preposterous, like a B-movie plot. Yet here he was, gazing upon a princess from another world, clinging to life on a battered ship, with Earth a mere speck in the distance. "Yes," she answered, pressing her eyes shut. "I had no time to gather others, to evaluate more than a handful of potential humans. When I landed, your presence was there, at just the right moment. And the reading matched. Ethan Stone, your DNA is unique. Her gaze found him. I am sorry for the deception, but I had no choice. He looked at her, feeling anger, confusion, a flicker of excitement. We're total strangers. What exactly do you want me to do? She cast her eyes downward, a hesitant flicker passing over her face. I need you to return with me to Zeylora. There is a ritual, an ancient ceremony, that can break the curse. It requires the genetic resonance of a human, specifically your genetic signature. She paused, shaking her head. But I cannot force you. If you refuse, I will return you to Earth as soon as I can. The choice is yours. Ethan drew a slow breath, trying to steady his galloping heart. The magnitude of the request, the strangeness of it all, made his head spin. Yet he recalled his lonely nights in New York, his dissatisfaction with his mundane existence, the longing for something, anything, to give his life purpose. An impulse of compassion and wonder overcame his doubts. You saved me from those agents, he finally said, words flowing quietly. And it sounds like I might be able to help save your people. I'll do it, Lyra. I'll go to Zeylora. Relief broke across her face like dawn. She took his hand, her skin still feverish to the touch. You cannot imagine what this means to me, she said, voice quivering with emotion. To my world. To our future. With a shudder, the ship lurched, the engine thrumming louder. We're about to jump, Lyra warned, bracing herself. Ethan followed suit, clutching the nearest handhold. A kaleidoscope of starlight filled the windows, swirling in cosmic ribbons. His stomach felt as though it had turned upside down, and the universe became a storm of color, noise, and impossible sensations. Then, with a final jolt, it all subsided. A deep silence ensued. They had arrived at Zeylora. Ethan stepped out of the craft onto a landing platform that overlooked a vast alien city. Towers of shimmering crystal rose from the ground, reflecting the light of twin suns that cast overlapping shadows. The sky was a faint violet, dotted with swirling clouds that glowed faintly. Bridges spanned from spire to spire, and flying vehicles zoomed through the air in graceful arcs. A hush fell as he took it all in, an alien sunrise coloring the horizon in shades of lavender and gold. Lyra, supported by a metal staff that emitted a gentle hum, gestured for him to follow. He felt the stares of curious onlookers, humans being a rare sight in these corridors of sleek architecture and glowing insignias. Indeed, as they passed, some figures stepped back with startled surprise or whispered among themselves. Others looked upon Ethan with open resentment, their eyes flickering, lips pressed in thin lines. Near the end of the causeway stood a group of Zeyloran guards, their armor gleaming with interwoven patterns reminiscent of constellations. They bowed to Lyra, but there was a cold courtesy in their greeting, as if they were torn between respecting her status and disliking her decision to bring a stranger to their domain. Ethan could not shake off the uneasy feeling that something deeper simmered behind their guarded expressions. An elderly Zeyloran dignitary approached, wearing long, flowing robes decorated with swirling star patterns. His face, lined with age, held a formal courtesy. Princess Lyra, it is a relief to see you returned alive. The council has been anxious, as your ship vanished from our sensors hours ago. His gaze drifted toward Ethan, and his expression tightened. And this man, is he truly the one we require? Lyra's voice held a note of pride, despite her lingering weakness. Yes, Lord Sirius. He has agreed to help us. I trust that we will show him the respect due to one who may break our curse. Please prepare the meditation chambers, along with the royal sanctum. We must begin at once, or the illness consuming our world will only worsen. Lord Sirius bowed stiffly, but his eyes barely concealed his skepticism. As you command, my princess, he said, before turning to dispatch several subordinates to make the necessary arrangements. Ethan watched them glide away, their steps eerily soundless. Lyra sighed as she led him through corridors of pale crystal, the walls etched with spirals of cosmic imagery. You must forgive some of my people, she said, her voice hushed. We have grown suspicious over the centuries, and humans have not always greeted us with kindness in our limited contact. We once attempted discreet diplomacy, but it ended poorly. Still, I have faith that together, we can transcend these misgivings. Ethan's own misgivings swirled like a storm in his mind. It was one thing to be told he was part of a cosmic destiny. It was another to face the muttered hostility of an entire species that had pinned their hopes, or their fear, on him. As he absorbed the grandeur of the architecture, the luminous energy in the air, he began to wonder if he had made a mistake. Could he, an awkward engineer, truly unravel an ancient spell that bound an entire civilization? They arrived at a suite of rooms perched high above the city, connected by a circular atrium ringed with open windows that let the gentle alien breeze flow through. Lyra explained that these rooms would serve as his temporary residence, and she hoped he would find them comfortable. The walls, formed from the same translucent crystal, changed color with the shifting light outside, cycling through delicate shades of lavender, silver, and rose gold. A bed-like platform, piled with soft cushions, awaited him. A series of alien consoles lined one wall, their glyphs pulsing like living script. Meanwhile, a panoramic window offered a stunning view of the metropolis below. "You must rest," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "We will begin the preparations for the ritual tomorrow, but there are political matters to address first. I must speak to the council, and we shall have inquiries to face. They will want to test your sincerity, your worthiness, perhaps even your motives. I fear it will not be easy." Looking at her injured form, Ethan gently touched her arm. "And you? Shouldn't you see a doctor, or something?" She tried to smile, though it turned into a grimace. "I am healing, thanks to your help. There are intricacies in our biology. The healing serum you administered will continue its work, but I must rest as well. Worry not, for there are advanced medics here with greater expertise. They will see to me soon." Watching her walk away with a dignified limp, staff humming softly against the crystal floor, Ethan felt a pang of worry. The princess carried not only her injury, but the weight of an entire world's suffering. And unbelievably, so did he. It was enough responsibility to make him want to run and hide, as he had done so many times before in the face of social awkwardness or looming deadlines. Yet this was different. The stakes were incalculably higher. The life of an entire planet rested on the success of a ritual that, until moments ago, was pure myth to him. He slept fitfully, drifting in and out of unsettling dreams filled with swirling starlight and whispers in an unknown tongue. Sometimes he dreamt of Earth, saw the Manhattan skyline fade as the spaceship soared away, felt the trembling of Central Park's grass under his feet once again. At other times, he saw a dark presence looming over a silent crowd of Zeyloran faces, all of them turning to him with pleading eyes. Only one figure stood apart, a shadowy silhouette that radiated dark power, the shape crowned by an aura of malevolence. He woke in a cold sweat, heart racing, unsure what was real and what was the work of his anxious imagination. When morning came, if it could be called that under the dual suns, Ethan tried to steel his nerves. Servants brought him a meal of odd, fruit-like substances, their skins shimmering with faint, bioluminescent patterns. He found the taste refreshing, a blend of sweet and tangy flavors he had never experienced. While he ate, he tried to recall what Lyra had said, that an ancient force, older than recorded time, had cursed the monarchy and, by extension, the entire planet. The next few days passed in a blur of diplomatic gatherings and whispered controversies. Lyra introduced Ethan formally to the Zeyloran Council. Dozens of robed figures, representing different regions and factions, convened in a grand circular chamber, the ceiling a stained glass mosaic of swirling galaxies. He stood in the center, feeling like a solitary statue on display, forced to answer polite but probing questions about his background, his intentions, his human limitations. Some members voiced objections openly, questioning whether relying on an outsider was an act of desperation or folly. Others, more open-minded, acknowledged that thousands of years of trying to break the curse had led nowhere, so perhaps a fresh perspective might offer hope. Amidst the swirling tapestry of political tension, Ethan found an unexpected ally in Serena, a noblewoman who wore her hair coiled in shimmering braids that dripped with crystal beads. Her family line suffered a direct strain of the curse's effect, manifesting in her fragile health and a weakened immune system. Though she barely knew Ethan, she was fiercely determined to see the curse lifted, and she guided him through cultural protocols, advising him on how best to navigate the formalities of Zeyloran society. Over quiet cups of spiced tea, she told him tales of the monarchy's past, of legendary queens who tried to confront the curse but fell to madness, of fleeting glimpses of hope that ended in tragedy. Through it all, she maintained a firm, unwavering conviction that perhaps this time, things would be different. Meanwhile, Lyra made appearances at court, though her wound had not fully healed, leaving her paler than usual. Nevertheless, she maintained her regal composure, deflecting critics with calm eloquence. She advocated for Ethan, reminding everyone of the centuries they had spent searching for a solution, all of which failed to even graze the heart of the ancient magic strangling their civilization. For while Zeylora's technology had soared to remarkable heights, they could not quell the intangible forces that bound them. In private, when the day's politics were done, Ethan and Lyra talked at length in his suite, the conversation drifting from practical to personal. She spoke of her childhood, growing up under the weight of prophecy. She described how, at a young age, she was taught that her destiny lay in finding a way to free her people, no matter the sacrifice. Yet that sense of responsibility also robbed her of a normal life. She had never ventured beyond her palace walls without a retinue of guards, never made genuine friendships unshadowed by her royal lineage. Ethan, in turn, found himself sharing more than he expected. His childhood spent tinkering with outdated computers, the bullying he endured in school, the heartbreaks that pushed him to retreat into his own head. It felt strangely comforting to unburden himself to someone who, despite her alien origin, seemed to understand the loneliness that came from walking a path set apart from everyone else. As the days wore on, rumors abounded that certain factions sought to undermine the entire endeavor. Secret murmurs circulated that perhaps allowing an off-worlder to meddle in the monarchy's curse would provoke the ancient force to retaliate. Others whispered that it might be better to let the monarchy collapse altogether, freeing the people from centuries of royal rule. Lyra dismissed such talk, for while she believed in evolving her people's political structure, she knew that the monarchy's downfall under the curse would be catastrophic, plunging Zeylora into chaos. Yet, ironically, the seeds of a new idea began to sprout in Ethan's mind. He had always been uncomfortable with hierarchies, having grown up in a place where anyone could rise through merit or innovation. Why should Zeylora remain under absolute rule if it no longer served its citizens? Perhaps, if they managed to break the curse, they could also transform their system of governance, forging a more inclusive society. But the notion was radical, and Ethan kept it to himself for now, uncertain of how Lyra or the council would react. Finally, the time arrived to attempt the ritual. It took place in a hidden sanctum beneath the royal palace, carved into the living crystal foundation of Zeylora itself. The journey there was solemn, winding through corridors illuminated by glowing orbs, each corridor guarded by silent sentinels whose faces were set in grim determination. Lyra guided Ethan into the heart of the sanctum, which contained a circular dais etched with ancient symbols that pulsed with faint, rhythmic light. A sense of age weighed heavily on the air, as though the walls themselves remembered centuries of failed attempts. Priests and priestesses in flowing robes stood in a ring around the dais, their voices raised in a low, melodic chant. Lyra took Ethan's hand, leading him to the dais's center. She leaned in, whispering, "Do not fear. The energies here are strong, but they will not harm you. Not if we do this correctly." He swallowed hard, stepping into the circle of glyphs. A deep vibration coursed through the air, and the chanting grew louder. Lyra began to recite words in the Zeyloran tongue, her voice echoing off the crystal walls. Smoke drifted from golden censers, carrying the scent of some alien herb. Light coalesced around them, swirling in patterns that seemed to follow the steps of the chanting. Ethan's heart pounded. He felt an intangible force brush against his skin, tugging at the very fabric of his being. Then, with a sudden rush, a barrier of swirling light rose like a vortex around the dais, encasing Lyra and Ethan inside. The chanting rose to a crescendo, and the symbols on the floor glowed bright. Lyra clasped his hands, her shimmering eyes locking with his. He felt a flood of warmth surge through him, as if their two essences were merging. But beneath that warmth lay a darker presence, something that growled and hissed like a beast awakened from slumber. A thunderous voice, not quite a sound, more like a roar felt deep in the mind, reverberated through the sanctum. Who dares challenge the ancient bond? Who presumes to sever that which was decreed in the first age? Ethan nearly collapsed from the psychic weight of that voice. He could scarcely breathe. Lyra trembled, sweat beading on her brow, yet she pressed on. The monarchy of Zeylora begs release, she intoned, her voice shaking but resolute. We bring the human, who bears the key in his mortal flesh. A surge of energy pulsed, slamming into Ethan with an almost physical force. He gasped, knees buckling. The presence, whatever it was, seemed to peer into his soul. He sensed it rummaging through his memories, his hopes, his fears. It coiled around his genetic code, as though verifying the prophecy. Yes, it growled, the resonance is strong. But it is not enough to merely bring the key. The key must be turned, and that turning exacts a price. Ethan glanced at Lyra, panic in his eyes, and saw the guilt etched across her face. What price? He managed to gasp, voice quivering. Lyra bit her lip, her face contorting in sorrow. Ethan, the old text said that the bearer of the key might die in the process. The energies unleashed can be fatal. She choked back tears as she forced the words out. I didn't know how else to convince you. If I told you everything, I feared you'd refuse, and my world would remain cursed. I am so sorry. Betrayal, shock, and fear swirled in Ethan's mind. For a moment, he wanted to recoil. But then he remembered the lonely nights in New York, the aimlessness, the yearning for something greater. He thought of Serena's frail health, the sorrowful looks in the eyes of the people who pinned their hopes on him. He thought of Lyra, who had carried this burden her entire life. Slowly, he steadied himself, holding her gaze. Lyra, you should have told me. But I'm not running. If I can save your people, I'll do whatever I can. The swirl of energy intensified, as though the ancient entity reveled in the tension. A crackling arc of light darted across Ethan's chest, stinging like a live wire. He cried out, but refused to collapse. Lyra gripped his hand tighter, channeling her own willpower into him, helping him stand against the agonizing onslaught. Suddenly, from behind them, a trembling voice echoed, "Stop!" The barrier of light flickered, and the priests and priestesses halted their chanting in alarm, unsure whether to continue or not. The swirling energies cooled slightly as a figure stepped forward, revealed to be Lord Sirius. He looked upon the scene with pale horror. "Princess, we have not fully explored all alternatives. Must we sacrifice this human? There has to be another way." The ancient presence rumbled with dark amusement. Another way? There is no other. The monarchy has reigned for millennia, binding the lifeblood of Zeylora. I demand my price if you wish to unbind. Ethan, fighting the waves of agony, clenched his teeth. An idea, half-formed, danced in his mind. "Wait," he whispered, voice shaking. What if the monarchy changed? If the monarchy no longer ruled by ancient rites, if it was replaced by a system that actually represented all of Zeylora, then maybe the curse would have no meaning to feed on. Monarchy ties your power to the entire world. But if that monarchy is voluntarily dissolved, transformed, or redefined, the ancient contract might be broken without needing my life. He sensed the presence falter for a moment, as though caught off guard. Lyra looked at him with sudden clarity. The priest stirred. This was a radical proposition, upend the monarchy that had stood for countless generations. She turned to Lord Sirius, then back to Ethan. Are you suggesting a democracy? That we restructure the entire world's governance? Ethan gritted his teeth, nodding. Yes. Offer the ancient force a new bargain. Instead of a monarchy that feeds its magic, create a system that breaks that bond entirely. We can present the dissolution of monarchy as a form of tribute, a complete rewriting of the status quo. The curse stands on tradition, but if that tradition ceases to exist, it might nullify the claim. The presence hissed. You cannot simply discard eons of law. The monarchy is the heart of Zeylora. It was written in the first text that you must pay the blood price. Lyra squared her shoulders, eyes shining with determination. I am willing to let go of the throne to save my people, she declared, voice echoing in the chamber. We will form a new government, a council of equals, and I shall serve as an advisor or representative, but not as a sovereign who wields absolute power. In doing so, the monarchy's bond with the planet will be severed. You, Ancient One, will have no hold upon us. The cosmic presence roared, shaking the sanctum. Ethan felt the walls tremble. Cracks appeared in the crystal floor. For a moment, it seemed the entire chamber would shatter. Then, abruptly, the violent energy subsided, as though an invisible hand stilled the storm. A deep, thunderous sigh reverberated through the air. Very well. The monarchy dies with you, princess. This is the tribute I accept, the end of a lineage that once bound me. Go forth. Your people are free from my curse, for now. Light exploded in a dazzling flash. Ethan flung up his arms, eyes seared by brilliance. When his vision cleared, the swirling barrier was gone. The chanting had stopped. The priests looked around in shocked relief, tears streaming down some of their faces. Lyra sank to the floor, gasping, but alive. A hush fell across the entire sanctum, as though the planet itself were holding its breath. Slowly, Ethan went to Lyra and helped her stand. She clung to him, tears in her eyes. You found another way, she whispered, voice trembling with gratitude. You saved us, Ethan. You saved me. I never imagined that we could change the monarchy so drastically. My ancestors believed it was eternal. But you saw a different path. He realized then how monumental a moment this was. They had just upended the entire structure of Zeylora's government, ending a curse that spanned centuries. Though the road ahead would be riddled with political complexities, the future now shimmered with possibility. He placed a reassuring hand on Lyra's shoulder, feeling the comforting hum of her life force, no longer overshadowed by the ancient darkness. In the weeks that followed, Zeylora underwent the first steps of transforming into a more democratic society. Debates raged across the planet. Some monarchist loyalists resisted, unwilling to part with tradition. Others celebrated, claiming that a new dawn had arrived. Lyra herself renounced her title as princess, adopting the role of an interim council member. She retained a symbolic leadership position for ceremonial matters, but the notion of absolute rule vanished. Freed from the curse, the Zeylorans felt their vitality return, their technology blossoming in new directions. The overall sense of renewal was palpable. Where once gloom and suspicion reigned, now curiosity and hope spread. Ethan chose to remain on Zeylora. The council, now operating in a nascent democratic structure, asked him to serve as an ambassador to Earth, bridging the two worlds and smoothing future interactions. Ironically, the awkward loner from New York found himself thrust into a diplomatic role, forging treaties and introducing Earth's culture and technology to the Zeyloran people, while carefully curating Zeylora's wonders for Earth's eventual awareness. His relationship with Lyra deepened, transcending titles and politics. They spent quiet moments in the garden balconies of the new council chambers, discussing the future. She taught him about the constellations visible from Zeylora, and he showed her how to code small programs on a device he'd salvaged. Their bond, forged in crisis, matured into an abiding trust and, eventually, love. Over time, she no longer merely symbolized a royal lineage. She was an individual, free to shape her destiny. And Ethan, once a solitary figure in the night-lit corridors of a New York office, discovered he had a capacity for bravery and leadership he never dreamed possible. Years passed, and Zeylora blossomed under its new democracy. Earth, upon learning of Zeylora and carefully managed revelations, decided to establish peaceful exchanges. Though many humans remained skeptical or fearful, these concerns were tempered by the remarkable benefits of collaboration in science, medicine, and cultural exchange. Ethan's name became well known, not for flashy heroics, but for quietly, tirelessly working to bridge two worlds. And, in time, he and Lyra welcomed twin children into the cosmos, unique hybrids with gentle features, faintly shimmering skin, and wide, inquisitive eyes that reflected the best of both species. The children represented the union of two worlds that had once been strangers. Their laughter rang through corridors that once echoed with ominous chanting. They grew up learning the languages of Earth and Zeylora, forging friendships across the stars. On a morning bathed in a gentle glow from Zeylora's twin suns, Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, his heart brimming with contentment. He gazed upon sleek towers of crystal and metal, the air bustling with graceful vehicles, the people below moving with purpose and freedom. Beside him, Lyra pressed close, their children playing in the background, giggling. He marveled at how one strange night in Central Park had led him here, to a love he never expected, to a life of meaning and wonder. You once said you felt like you were no one special, Lyra remarked softly, sliding her hand into his. Yet you changed the fate of an entire planet. Ethan smiled, lifting her fingers to his lips. I was only part of the story. You, your people, were the ones who truly had the courage to change. I just showed you a little piece of human stubbornness." She laughed at that, a melodic sound that still made his heart flutter. Their gaze swept across the horizon, where the sky's violet tones shifted to pink, golden rays wrapping the city in warm light. This was the new dawn, for Zeylora, for Earth, for all beings who dared to hope. And in that shared quiet, they silently promised each other that they would face whatever challenges might come, together, forging new paths that linked distant worlds. As the twins ran over, tugging at Ethan's arm, demanding to be lifted up so they could see the city from the balcony's edge, he obliged with a grin. Lyra joined them, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. A breeze, soft and cool, drifted by, carrying the distant hum of a planet that, once cursed, now thrived. High above, the stars waited, inviting further journeys, further unity, further hope. And Ethan knew, with an overwhelming surge of gratitude, that their story, far from ending, would continue to unfold in countless bright and unexpected chapters. For now, however, in that peaceful moment, with the city in the distance and his beloved family by his side, life could not have felt more complete. And so it was, with the specter of the ancient curse lifted, that the alien queen's only hope found its happiest ending, written in the sky of a world reborn, and in the hearts of a man and a woman who had forged an unbreakable bond across the stars.